Welcome back, everybody. Well, now we're still muted. There we go. All right, we made it. We're back. Hi, everybody. Jennifer over there on the left, on your left. Jennifer, Cathe Ray, Needle and Haystack on the right. Needle and Haystack logo up at the top right. And if you want to purchase things, all kinds of things, needlestack.com will get you to the website. But I'm warning you, once you start, there's too many things there. You'll have fun.
It's like being a dealer.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yep. Last time we gathered, people had asked if Cathe would be putting together kits for Summerhill, the accompaniment to Spring Hill, and she is in fact doing that. And so give us another week or so. She just started. She just got the charts, so she's just starting on it. So she's putting together things. Maybe we can lay that out, Cathe, and show people what. You have that handy, or did you put it away?
Yeah, no, I got it.
Here,
I've just started doing the silk conversion. Trying to find. So what I do is I go and stand in front of the wall of silks and kind of see what I can find that matches. I can't always find matches, so sometimes it's just about what plays nicely together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've started working on it, so I should have it done in a couple of days.
Okay. So as soon as that is, we'll actually you can mark it down. WeTalkFiber.com/Summerhill, and that will.
Yeah, when I get it done, I'll let you know.
Yeah, and then so as soon as that, you can just put that down and check it in a couple days, and then as soon as she has it, that'll link to the Needle and the Haystack site, and you can get it.
And the funny thing is that the colors I picked for what we're going to talk about tonight turn out to actually be in Summerhill.
Oh, now there we go. See?
Oh. Yeah.
It's almost as if we plan these things.
I know.
Yeah. So check in a couple days, WeTalkFiber.com/Summerhill, and that will get you to Needle and Haystack, and whatever kits she puts together, then you'll be able to purchase there. And obviously she can help you with linen and charts and everything else. So she'll have it all set up there. So just mark that down, /Summerhill, and then check in a couple, 3 days, and yeah, you'll be able to buy. So excited about that, because this series that Karen has put together is really good. Really good.
Yeah, it's really got some really attractive flowers in it.
Yeah, she's good. Okay, so tonight Cathe is going to do thread talk we just learned what she was going to talk about just before we started. I'm pumped up. I'm making notes tonight, folks. I'm pumped up because it's something I've wanted to know how to do what didn't involve guesswork. So now a couple other things. Sunday is Cindy Lee Gershon, who is a judge, a needlework judge, EGA needlework judge. And so Sunday's podcast, we talk about what judges look for, all in the context of helping you be a better stitcher. So an excellent
cool.
Discussion with her, tips in there, things to watch out for, things to avoid, that kind of thing. And then now next Wednesday, then Cindy will be with us live to talk about things and take your questions. So if you have questions that you would like to ask a judge, if I could just talk to a judge, next Wednesday is going to be your chance. So think about between now and then what those questions will be. Listen to the podcast Sunday, and I'm sure it'll spark some other things in your head. But 1-2 deal there, Sunday and Wednesday with Cindy Lee Gershon, and an active, experienced judge who will be able to help you. So watch for that. Excuse me. Now, next Friday, July 30, is World Embroidery Day. And help us spread the word on this so we get a lot of people involved from 2 to 5 Eastern time. 2 to 5 Eastern time in the afternoon. We're just going to have a 3-hour stitch and chat session on World Embroidery Day. All right. The first hour, Natalie Dupuy will join us, so we'll get some embroidery and some gold work, and then some more gold work. And then the second hour, Cathe Andrews will join us from her studio. And look up Cathe Andrews, the Unbroken Thread, the Unbroken Thread. Look her up if you don't know who she is. You'll want to have spend some time with her when she's with us. That's the second hour. Then the third hour, from 4 to 5 Eastern time, Barbara Hudson will be with us. She has a couple of new samplers and a new antique she just got. And of course, Barbara is just a treat to talk with on any day about anything. So those are our three artists, our three designers, Natalie Dupuy, Kathy Andrews, and Barbara Hudson. That afternoon, next Friday, week from Friday, the 30th, from 2 to 5 Eastern, right here on the YouTube channel. So get your projects, get a beverage, and something to write with, and join us for an afternoon of just stitching on World Embroidery Day. So that'll be fun. And then also remember that, remember, but also know, September 1 through 5 now, Jennifer, Beth, and I will all be at the EGA seminar in Chicago. Very excited. So we'll be doing a live show, 3 live shows, and other interviews and tours and showing of the exhibition and all of those things. So we'll do our best during the days that we're there, the 3 days that we're there, to bring you as much of the EGA seminar as we can. So if you've never been to a seminar, this is going to be your chance to at least get a feel for what goes on and hear from some of the people that are attending, teaching, or otherwise. So that'll be in September. More of that to come as we get things buttoned down. But we're all set up and we're good to go. So the 3 of us will be there, and it's going to be great. No drawing tonight because I don't want stuff on the screen, because we're going to put Cathe to work here in a second. The winner of the Avlia kit last week, Joanne Huard, Huard, Joanne. Joanne, that went in the mail Monday, so look for it toward the end of the week. Life got in the way; we didn't get to the post office, so I think it was Monday it went, and so look for it at the end of the week. And that's everything. Spread the word. Spread the word about World Embroidery Day so that people know about it and can join us for an afternoon of stitching with Natalie, Cathe, and Barbara Hudson. All right, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to clear the stuff off the screen, and we'll put Cathe up. Now, Cathe's, I'm excited. Get your paper out, make some notes. All right, here's Cathe's tabletop, and taking all the other stuff off the screen so we don't have anything in the way. All yours, Cathe, go.
Okay, thanks. You can ignore the black stuff in the corner. That's from our talk last time. I decided to use the same piece of fabric for this week. Sometimes I know in advance what I'm going to talk about. I didn't this week. I wasn't quite sure. And then as I'm brushing my teeth this morning, I'm going, oh, I know. So I decided to talk about how to create shades when you don't have enough of them. So I tell people this is a math problem, and a lot of times people's eyes glaze over, but it's actually not that hard to calculate what it is. So I'm going to start with 3 shades of DMC floss. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it turns out these 3 shades are in the Summerhill pattern. So this is 3834, 3835, and 3836. Now that's a really nice shade, but I need more colors than this, and there aren't things in between them. So if you've got more than one strand you're stitching with, you can actually create more shades with those numbers of strands. So I have a formula. Actually, I have a spreadsheet that I use that goes all the way up to 8 strands. If Gary wants me to share it, I can let him know where it is.
Okay.
This is one of the pages of my formula. Actually, I'll turn it this way so you can actually read it. So I have, I'm doing 2 strands, color 1, color 2, color 3, 3 strands, color 1, color 2, color 3. And I literally map out how many strands of each color I need. So I'm doing on this cardstock that I did here, I'm doing 3 strands in these 3 shades. So I'm going to go from 3 of color 1 to 3 of color 2 to 3 of color 3, and then I'm filling in the gaps by combining those colors. And you can do it with however many you want. As you notice, the more strands you get, even if I'm only using 3 colors, the more options I get, because it gives me more things to play with. Now, generally, I wouldn't need, if I'm stitching even with 5 strands, I'm not going to stitch with this many in the map. But this gives me the ability to look at it and go, well, I think I'm going to need this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So I can kind of look at it and figure out what's going to give me the best. But I put it in spreadsheet just because it's easier for me to keep track of what options there are, and then I can pick those options based on what the color is. And it also a lot of times has to do with how far apart they are. So if these three colors were, so if this color in particular was closer together to this one and I was using 5 strands, I probably wouldn't want as many options. But given that it's farther away from this than this color is to this, I might need to put some extras in there. So if you've never done this before, what I recommend you do is that you make a little, doesn't have to be cardstock, it can be anything else, but make something that's the map of what you want to do. So this starts with 3 of this color, which is the 3836. It ends with 3 of 3834, which is the darkest one. And I just do a shorthand of how many strands for color 1, 2, and 3. And I don't bother writing on this part what color it is because I don't really care. I have that written on the end of my little sheet here. So if I lay this down and walk away, I don't forget what color it was I was working with. Sometimes if I'm doing a needlepoint project, I might
We
have
have
2 or
a
3 of these
question.
going, and if
We have a question
yeah,
already. Sandy wants to
that's
know
fine.
if there is a technique to choosing the shades of floss you use to begin with to get the shades you want. Like, how do you pick your
Not
first 3 colors?
Not really. Usually it's more, well, so usually it's more driven by the fact that most threads don't have more than 5. Some only have 3. This particular family actually only has 3. That's it.
Okay.
That's how many there are. So I just picked them because it was easy, because 3 is a number that you will find really common in any of the threads. So whether you're stitching with needlepoint ink, Soie d'Alger, Rainbow Gallery, Splendor, Soie Cristal, DMC Floss, Anchor Floss, you can always usually pretty much find 3. You might not find more than 3, and you generally won't find more than 6. So if you've only got, you found 3 colors you like, and you're like, but I really need 5, but I can't make it up otherwise, just know that you can make it up as long as you're using at least 2 strands. You have to use at least 2 for this to work. You can't make it work if you're only using a single strand. So if you're using DMC Pearl Cotton, you're stuck with whatever options there are. This works really only with strandable threads.
Okay.
So in this case, if I picked, and let me go back to my my thing here with the Summerhill stuff. So like this family, these guys actually already have a lot of shades. So this isn't a family where I would really need to do this because I have enough there to do it. Now, if all I had was, say, those 3, then I would need to come up with a way to emulate the fact that I'm missing these 4 or 3 or
Okay.
whatever happens to be in the middle. This is basically to allow you to take the place of, if you don't have a family that's got enough shades for what you're after, it allows you a way to create them. So if you've already got 5 or 6
Cool.
shades, don't bother with this method. But if you need, 5 or 6 shades and you've only got 3 to start with, then this will give you a way to fudge that and give you more options than you would normally have otherwise. So if you found a chart or even a needlepoint piece where it had a bunch of shades in it in a color you despise or a color you're just not really fond of, and you've got another color that you love, then you can in fact actually create the shades in a color that you really like. You just have to work at it a little bit. So in this case, my map for 3 shades, 3 strands means I'm going to end up with 9 different colors here. So this starts with 3 strands of my lightest color. The next one is 2 strands of my lightest color and one strand of this one. And then I've got 2 strands of the lightest color and one strand of this one. And then I go to one of the lightest and 2 of the middle. And then I've got one of each. So this is my 1, 1, 1.
Mm-hmm.
Then I end up in the middle color. So now I've gotten to just one single color. There's not multiples in there. And then I go to, I'm not using any of the light. I'm using 2 of the middle, 1 of the dark. Then I'm going to use 1 of the middle, 2 of the dark. And then I'm going to end up at 3 of the dark. So out of that, I end up with 9 shades. And I stitched a little sample here in the corner. And even though you're not going to get a lot of really good granularity from the photograph, from the video, that's actually a feature in this case. Because what you see is I've now gone from, these are the 3 colors I started with. That one, and that one. And now I've got 9. So this gives me a lot more ability to be able to do shading than if I'm stuck with just those 3.
And the thing that I'm noticing here, and this was the first question I had, was when you do this, are we going to look at a bunch of striped things, but visually they all blend in, so they literally are.
They do. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and particularly when you think about it, think about pixels on a computer screen. So if you look at the pixels up really close, you're going to be able to see the differentiation in the color, whether in this case it's a solid color or a combo color.
Right.
But when you stand away from it, you get that really high definition television look. If you're going to look at these up close when you're stitching them, you're going to notice some stripiness. So like in these two, where this one in particular, where I've got 2 of the lightest color and 1 of the darkest color, I can see a little bit of the stripiness. But when I mix that in with all the other bits, and then I look at it from 3 feet away, I'm not going to notice the stripiness. So we tend to get a little hung up about I'm stitching it and it looks funny. My rule of thumb is sit it down on the edge of either on your mantle or on a table, or actually usually I put it on the couch, and then stand however far away from it you would normally view it. If you can't tell, then go for it.
Yep.
And 99% of the time you can't tell, because then it becomes like a pixel in a TV screen or a computer monitor.
Yep.
So it's really a pretty easy thing to do. So this is with 3 strands of these colors. This one over here on this side, this one I did with 2 strands of those same colors. So because I'm only using 2 strands, I only get 4 shades. Actually, I did 2 strands of 2 colors. I used these 3 colors. So because I've only got 2 strands, I don't end up with as many shades. I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5. So it still gives me a nice shading, which you can kind of tell from there, but it's not as many because I don't have as many strands to play with. So in this case, this is the formula. So for this one, I did 2 of color 1, 1 of each of color 1 and color 2, 2 of color 2, 1 each of color 2 and color 3, and then 2 of color 3. I'll put that back in the screen so that you can see.
How would this work out with overdyed flosses?
It doesn't work with overdyes.
Okay.
And the reason it doesn't work with overdyes is because you've also got too much movement of color in there. Well, okay, let me back that up. It works with overdyes that are more tonal. So if you've got an overdye that's got like sort of slightly shades of green, you might be able to make it work. But the problem is that sometimes the tones fight with each other. So let me go grab a couple and show you what I mean. With the ones that are multiple colors, there's no way. They don't work at all because there's just too much busyness. It really fights. So let's assume that I need to do something with these 2. So you can see they're pretty far apart. Now this is a 12 strand, so I have way more strands to work with, even though I only have 2 colors. So because there's not a huge amount of color change within this one, or even within this one, I can probably get this to work. Because I would still be able to combine them. There'll be a little bit more movement in the combination of them, but it's not going to be super bad. Where it would be a problem is if I'm doing it in a color like Garden Path, where this has just way too many colors in it.
Oops.
Yeah.
There's no way to do that. It doesn't happen. So over dye, hand dyed doesn't necessarily mean variegated. It just means that it's
Right.
been hand dyed. Over dyed typically means it's somewhat variegated. Hand dyed just means it's hand dyed. So some
Right.
colors, like they're probably a good 30% of the Gloriana colors, and about 20 to 30% of the water lilies are more this kind. They're more these shades of, this is more of a minty one, but same kind of idea, where you've got a little bit of the shades within the same thing. But I still would stick with things where the color movement in the over dye in the variegated is not extreme, because if it's too extreme, it might be a problem. But then again, you can also take this apart and then cut lengths that of color where it seems like there's not so much movement, and it would work. So when I'm working with over dyes, I don't necessarily use it just the way it comes off the skein. I'll actually kind of play with it a bit. So that's another way that you could play with it. But yeah, for something like this, you could in fact actually probably make it work.
Yeah, I'm doing a project where I'm using a DMC variegated that's all reds though, but the red goes into a little bit of a purplish, and I don't want that purple part to stand out. So, and I'm doing 2 strands. So what I decided to do is I'm just doing it as if it's a single color and doing the loop method and folding it over. And when I'm stitching, it's blending that purple in and making it more of a red because it goes with the other. And so I can use it and not have to cut the purple out. And it's working beautifully.
Yeah, and again, that kind of depends on what the thread in the skein looks like. Because some of the problem is that, like, you know, like with this one where you've got so much color change that you just don't get enough. It would be too hard. If you do this with the fold over method, you end up with mud.
Oh yeah, this one, it's just like I said, it's
looks
all
kind of
red.
Weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could see where, is that one of the old fashioned variegated ones, or is that one of the variations?
It's, let's see, I've got it right here.
If it's a 4000, it's a variations.
It is 4205.
Yeah, that's one of the variations. So DMC variations are done basically to emulate a hand dyed thread.
Right.
So as opposed to the old fashioned variegation, which was just light, medium, dark, you know, that was the stuff I grew up in the 50s and 60s. That, you know, when you did your days of the week embroidered your days of the week towels, you used the traditional variegation. That stuff's mostly gone away, and it's gotten replaced by the variations because it looks a bit more like a hand dyed thread. A side note, the advantage of using the variation sometimes is that because it's a DMC thread, it's actually washable.
Yes,
so if you're going to do an embroidery
it.
piece, so if you're going to do an embroidery piece where you need to launder it, then use something like variations. It does come in a Pearl 5, because then you don't need to worry about whether or not you can even throw it in the washing machine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, that's why I like it. And it's a lot cheaper too.
So when I do these things, basically what I do is I do a test of it, particularly if it's a color I haven't done this with before. So that's why I have my little thing over here so this is just a 4x4 square. And I did it a needlepoint just because it was easier for me to do it, faster for me to do it. Plus 3 strands works better on needlepoint than it does on a lot of cross stitch fabrics. So I'll do just a little bit of a square. so that I know which shades I might want to use if I don't need all of these.
Mm-hmm.
So I might decide, for example, that the one that's got the most stripiness, which is the 2 of the first color, this one, which is the 2 of the first color and the 1 of the last color, that might be, I might not really want that one. I might just want to go from these 2 to this one and leave that one out. And I might even want to leave this one out and just go to there.
Now, Cathe, when you stitch, I assume that you're just letting the threads go where they go rather than
Yep.
trying to lay them.
Oh yeah, my life is too short to lay threads.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only stuff I tend to lay these days, well, if I were doing it for some competition, that's a whole other topic to talk to the judge about.
Right.
But if I'm just doing my own personal stitching, or like in this case where I'm doing it to stitch a sample of something, I don't bother. I just let the thread go where it's
Yeah.
going to go. I do lay things like ribbons. A lot of times, so I'll lay, if I'm actually stitching with a silk ribbon, or if I'm stitching with neon rays or a Kreinik ribbon, or you know, something like that, when ribbon floss or something where it looks kind of funky if it's not laid,
Right.
then I'll do it. But just for regular floss, like I said, my life is too short.
Yeah, but
I got too many other things to work on.
in this instance, though, too, I would think if you didn't lay them, the blending effect is more powerful.
It does, because what happens is so let's take the one here that is in fact the most stripy. So if I take this and try to lay it, I'm going to end up with that darker color in the same place all the time.
Yeah.
And that's not really a feature in this case.
Right.
So it's going to be much more noticeable. Whereas when it's kind of twisted up, yeah, you might think it's going to look like a candy cane, but because you're seeing such tiny segments of it, it doesn't look like that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I were laying it, as in I were doing longer stitches, that might be a different thing. But generally for this kind of stuff, if you're doing satin stitching where you have to do this, then you do have to think a lot more about which of these you choose, because you do end up with a bit more stripiness if the colors are too far apart and you are actually laying the stitches.
Mm-hmm.
This works best when you're doing either cross stitch or tent stitch or a closer together stitch. It doesn't work quite as well with satin stitching. That becomes a bit more problematic.
Yeah. But again, keeping in mind that your viewing distance plays a major role in this, so be careful.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It does. Yeah. And it's also going to make a difference too on, like I said, with how many strands you're doing and what the count of the fabric is. So if you're using 28 count linen and you're doing 2 strands of floss, you're going to end up having this more of an effect because I've only got 2 strands.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to have as many options to play with, but that might be perfectly fine. And if I'm doing it with, in this case, 3 strands on 18 count, if I were doing some 13 mesh, I would need to use I would need to use all 6 strands. And at 6 strands, I end up with way more options. I end up with, I forget how many it is. I actually printed my sheet, but I think I end up with like 14. Wow. Yeah, I end up with more like 18. I end up with more like 18 options. Typically, it's pretty close to the number of strands times the number of colors. So 3 strands, 3 colors, you get 9. 3 strands, 4 colors, you get 12.
Okay.
You don't always use them all. Sometimes like I said, sometimes you drop them out in the middle because it's either too many options or they don't really look quite right.
Right.
But I do recommend that if you want to try this, take some fabric and just make some samples of what you want to do with it so that you have a better feel for, yeah, that's going to work for me, or no, that's not. Because even though there's a math formula to this, the reality is what changes it all is this. So let me grab a couple of my my other colors that are farther apart. So let's say I'm doing 2 strands and I only have these two colors to work with, that's a little trickier, even with 3 strands, because of the fact that they are so far apart. So I
Mhm.
need to think a bit more about what ones I use. Um, but if they were closer together, then I wouldn't necessarily think about it quite as much. So let's say I needed to do it with those two. Those
Yeah.
two are
Mhm.
already pretty close together. So if I needed a third one in the middle, it's a lot easier.
Mhm.
This
Mm-hmm.
makes more sense, or all 4 of these makes more sense. If I need a sixth, so let's assume here I need a shade in between, then
Mm-hmm.
combining these guys, I might not shade these guys at all. I might just leave them out of the equation. I might only use these two and then try to create a couple of shades in between. These are close enough, that's close enough, but I kind of would really like something in the middle here. So
Yeah.
I might use the shading technique just to create what I need in here, but I don't need it for the rest. So just because you've got 4 shades doesn't mean you actually need to use this formula for all of them. You might really only want to use it for where the gap exists. Because for a lot of threads, there's a gap. There might be, like I said, there might be 4 shades, but there's a gap between these two, or there's a gap between these two.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What this is saying to me is a way to needle paint without doing long and short stitch. Like if I was
Yeah,
doing the side of a building and I wanted
Mm-hmm.
it into shadow at the bottom, I could play with these and create
yeah, yeah, you can.
a real nice effect going down the side of the building.
Yeah, you can with
Right.
just the threads you already have. And
Right.
and particularly if, let's say, you were using mostly these two for a part of this, for the side of the building. Let's assume it's a purple building, and what you really need is a little bit of a shadow, but this is too dark. Then doing a combination of these two to get the shadow.
Yes.
So if you're
Mm-hmm.
using, so let's say you're using 4 strands, you might want to use, either 2 and 2 or 3 and 1, just enough of this to give it a little bit of depth. Sometimes it's a judgment call when you look at it to go, yeah, that's too far apart, or that's the right, it's the Goldilocks moment.
Right.
Is it the right thing?
Yeah.
That's why I said there's a math thing to this, but the reality is that it really can change a lot based on which thread you're using, which colors you're doing, how far apart they are.
Right. Because see this. All right. So this, I'm just making this up on the fly here. But say for instance that side of a building and there's a tree next to it, then you could create the shadow of the tree on the building if you
Yeah,
wanted to go to all that trouble and still stay true to the colors of the building.
yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly if you're doing a brick color where you wanted to do something like, okay, so let's say that your bricks are this color. Granted, that's kind of a funky color for bricks, but let's say your bricks are that color and you need a little bit of shadow, then you add this as the darkest, but then you add something in between as well,
Right.
using these two colors to get it. Or if you really only want it to be just a really hint of something, you use just a little bit of this with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like painting, in that,
Mm-hmm.
if you're mixing colors, you're trying to figure out what the right mix is. Do I add more of a darker shade of that same color to it? Do I add black to it? In the case of thread, you can't add black. I mean, you can't really add another color like you can in paint, but you can use other colors in the family to give you that same kind of effect that you might try to get if you were painting something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Something I've done too with like the DMC variegated is sometimes it's like the color is just right, but you want to, it's too much, so you want to tone it back a little. I've taken a single strand of whichever way I wanted it to go from the DMC, from the variegated. I found the color
Yeah.
however I want to make it, and I use one strand of the solid with one strand of the variegated, and it's still variegated, but it tones it down to wherever you want it to go.
Yeah, it would do that because of the
You
fact that
know,
what you're adding, if you added too many strands, it would
well,
overwhelm it.
I just use
But
one and one.
just adding one is kind of like adding a shadow without really adding a shadow. Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would work. That would work really well. So it gives you the
Mhm.
opportunity to play with color in a different way than what you might be used to.
Mhm.
And think about thread colors outside the box of I'm only stuck with whatever the colors are that are in the palette of whatever thread I'm stitching with. But
Right.
like I said, it has to be something that's strandable because you
Oh yeah.
cannot do this with a single strand thread. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, that
Yeah.
was my topic for the night.
That's
Yeah.
excellent.
It's like painting with
Yeah,
watercolors. You just add a little of this and add a little of that
yeah,
until you get what
yeah,
you want.
yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
And then, and like I said, as long as you make some samples so that you stitch a little, I mean, you don't even need to stitch a little square like I did. You can just stitch a row like I did down in the corner. Something to give you a feel for this is what I want it to look like, gives you a better handle. And if you've never done it at all before, then I would recommend that you take, two or three of your favorite colors and just, create a little map for it and play with it. And like I said, when I do this, I always use something to put this on because otherwise I won't remember what it is I'm holding in my hand.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. So, it's like, and if I've done it, if that's what I'm doing, I will sometimes like write, in this case, because I was doing the map from this end to this end, I just knew as I was counting which one I was working on. But if I'm actually working on this on a piece, I will sometimes write on a piece of paper, usually I'll number these 1 to 9 and I'll
Yeah.
say, okay, I'm working currently on number 8 because, I get interrupted. It's time for a bathroom break. I need to go get some wine, or I need to go,
Yeah.
brew some tea, or it's time for dinner. And I come back to it and I'm like, okay, now what color was I working on?
Right.
We all have such busy lives that anything you can do to kind of make it less distracting, I think, or if you get distracted, coming back to it's a good thing.
Of those distractions, wine, I think, top of the list. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I
there is
don't
that.
know.
There is that. Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
stitch and drink at the same time. It would be over.
Okay.
Doesn't
Yeah, I
work for
do it.
me.
I do it after I've stitched.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's terrific, Cathe. Thank you.
Did anybody else have any questions?
Questions out there, or we're going to be done. Short, but
I
outstanding tonight.
I do have one thing to add that's unrelated to this,
Okay, go.
which is so I'd mentioned in one of the early talks that I did about Averrois's metallics because they've
Oh,
been
yes.
making metallics for I don't know since the 50s or so. Um, we're now bringing in Lamora at Access Commodities is bringing in more colors of the number 12 so that the needlepoint people have more options.
Mm.
So we're going to get some new colors in, and I'll post a note. I'll send you a note about that. You can add it to the comments, or I can add it to the comments if anybody's interested. I forget what the colors were that I had asked them to do, but it was red, green, the 2 colors of golds. I think there's silver. I think there might be a purple in there. I can't remember. I have to look.
Mm-hmm.
But we added a bit more to that so that the needlepoint people would have some more options.
And
So
those
we
those
do have a
metallics are
question.
fantastic to work with, right?
They are because they are twisted really nicely so that they lay better. They don't spiral off the spool as much.
Uh-huh.
They have a nicer hand and they're a lot easier to stitch with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got another question. Sandy
Yeah.
wants to know if there's a formula like this for using I can't talk today. Analogous
Analogous.
analogous colors like pale yellow with pale green or maybe pale purple and blue or
No, because the only things I've ever done are usually about shading the same colors, but I don't see
mhm
why you couldn't do it with
mhm
um analogous colors from the color wheel. It might be
yeah
more of an issue of do you end up with something that still looks attractive? That's kind of more the problem because the problem,
mhm
I mean, because when you're doing it with paint, what you end up with is a completely new color. That's
right
not the case with thread. What you're ending up with is still separate colors that visually kind of give a hint of a different color. So I don't know. That would be an interesting. I'll have to try that and see how that works.
Yeah, I did
I will take that under.
the
I'll take that under advisement.
one of the projects I did for my mom, that heart. We didn't really talk about the heart, but I sent the picture of the heart. The letters in that heart are using two different colors of thread that turn it into more of a gray color. You'd have to look at the picture
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
closely,
don't.
but we didn't.
I would have. I would have to try it. So Sandy, send me an email. Cathe at needlestack.com. Send me an email with what you were thinking of, and I'll try it and see if I can figure out whether or not it would actually potentially work.
There we go.
Right. And then Michelle wants to know how to make the thread smooth as you put the strands back together. Like, you take the two separate strands.
Oh, I always separate my strands. So
Mm-hmm.
when I do this, it doesn't matter whether I'm stitching with a single color or a multiple colors. I always take my strands, take them apart and put them back together again. So that takes
Right.
care of it. So if I'm doing like one of that one
Mm-hmm. And
and
I hold
one
mine
of
up so they can untwist too, like in the air.
I don't actually even bother with that because when I get done with it, I'm gonna actually run my finger down the whole thing.
Oh, see,
So
I do that and it
if I'm
keeps
doing
them from
these two,
twisting.
I get them at the end and then I just run my finger down the whole thing.
Oh.
And they will still twist, but I'm not worried about that when I'm stitching with it. So
Right.
I'm not worried about whether or not in these two, whether or not Michelle, I'm not worried about which side this stays on. When I'm stitching, I don't really care. I'm just going to let it do its thing. But
Right.
when I run my finger down it like this, it tends to straighten them out completely and it does tend to put them on the same side. Not always, but I don't really worry about it that
Mm-hmm.
much. But it does keep them
Right.
from being really lumpy bumpy.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you can always just run your finger down the combination before you stitch with it. But when I'm doing this, I actually prep this whole thing ahead of time. So I don't do it as I go. So I will actually spend the 5 or 10 minutes and separate all the colors and put them on here before I ever start stitching, because then I don't have
Mm.
to think about it while I'm stitching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Again, because the phone rings. I need to go help a customer. I'm at home and I need to go do something. It's just I have squirrel syndrome.
Well, but that's
Squirrel.
but that's handy, especially if you accumulate some of those project to project. Having those cards is very handy. So
Well, yeah, because a lot of times I end up with them left over anyway.
yeah.
I'll end up
Mm-hmm.
with little leftover bits. So the fact that that's one of the reasons why I always write down what the thread is that I'm doing this with and how many strands,
Mm-hmm.
so that when I go back to this later, I might be maybe I used most of them, but I still have 3 of them on here. I can go, oh, I kind of like that. I should put more back in there
Yeah.
because maybe I might use that on the next project.
Right.
So, like for example, for with the Summerhill, which is which is actually what these colors turn out being. If you're doing this on your own piece and you're doing it in a section where you think I would really like a color in between, then just take one of each of these and combine them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Karen Kluba might have a different opinion of this being a designer as opposed to a shop owner and a stitcher. I take charts as guidance, not as gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think she'd agree with you
So
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will many times go either that's not my favorite color family, or I kind of would like that shade to be a little bit closer, so I'm gonna make up a shade in between there.
Yeah.
I think I'd like that row
Mm-hmm.
to be something different. Some of that comes from the fact that as a needle pointer, you're left to your own devices 99% of the time. If you're
Yeah.
doing a needlepoint project, even if it's got a color on it and it even has some shading on it, you're still never going to really get here's what you have to do. It's going to be a user, guidance. You as the stitcher have to make that decision.
Right.
So a lot of times, even with cross stitch charts, sometimes I'll go, I think I need to add something there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think even in Karen's charts, doesn't she say, feel free to make it your
yeah.
own and
Oh,
add your own thing in
she's
here? And I think it's
Yeah,
in the
I think
chart.
she does that. I mean, I've
Yeah.
known, I would, most of the designer I've known over the years are always pretty jiggy with that. The only person I ever knew who wasn't was Marilyn Emblem from Lavender and Lace, who was really, really anal retentive about, she did not believe that people should change her charts.
Oh
Oh, my.
dear.
She passed away a number of years ago, but she would chastise people. If
Wow.
somebody posted a picture of one of her charts and they'd changed the colors or
wow.
done something, she was just very, because I think for her, she saw it as an art form. And that's not to say that it's not an art form, but she took
Mhm.
it as people saying they didn't like her art when they
Oh,
were
she took
basically
it
saying they just
personal.
didn't happen to like her color choice,
Right. Right.
Mhm.
you know?
She took
Yeah.
it really
And
personal.
so she kind of took it kind of personally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you were stitching 25, 30 years ago and you did something with one of her pieces that was different, you could pretty much be guaranteed that if she heard about it and knew how to reach you, you would hear
Oh dear.
about it.
Oh no.
Oh,
And
my.
she was never really, I mean, she was never rude about it, but it was just sort of like,
Oh
it
boy.
was kind of like the school marm kind
Yeah.
of approach
Oh
sometimes. Yeah,
Whoa.
it was
goodness.
kind of, it was interesting. Yeah.
Whoa.
That's funny.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
All
Oh
right.
my
Back
Okay.
on
goodness.
everybody back on screen. Thanks so much,
Okay.
Cathe. That was
Oh,
fun.
thanks. I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah. Learned things
Yeah.
again. Appreciate it. All right. Thanks, everybody.
I have a lot of weird stuff in my head.
Okay. Keep it coming. We'll take it. All right. Thanks, everybody, for
Okay.
joining us.
Thanks.
See you next week. Bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.